from the grassroots bottom up. We are here today to throw our support behind Vice President Kamala Harris. I'm clapping. You don't have to. It's a happy day. What can I say?
And they didn't clap. And for the listening audience, while he's doing this bit, he's pumping his fist like, yay, we can do it. Both fists together, swing, swaying, bottom up, grassroots, just in case you didn't hear. Welcome back to the Megyn Kelly Show. Who better to talk about all of this with than my next guest, Tulsi Gabbard. She was a 2020 presidential candidate on the Dem side, and she is author of the book For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. So you know how things went over there. Tulsi, great to have you back, especially so soon. But why shouldn't we, given the monumental developments since you were last on? This was a grassroots, bottom-up, quote, process that was really given to the voters, just in case you weren't aware, definitely not top-down. True?
Yeah, sure. If you buy what Chuck Schumer is selling, which I don't for a second. I was laughing as you played that clip, Megyn, because gosh, it's just so telling in so many ways, ending with him being the only guy clapping.
In front of really like loyal Democrats and campaign operatives, nonetheless.
Exactly. It really said it all about who's actually made the decision here. And it's not the rank and file Democrats. And we got to go all the way back to when the Democratic presidential primaries were supposed to occur. Stark contrast to when I ran in 2020. In that presidential primary where you actually had primaries, and there were a lot of different choices from voters to select from. How that pre-curation and pre-selection process occurred between the Democratic Party and the mainstream propaganda media back then is another topic for another conversation. But at least there were many names on the ballot, and voters had the opportunity to go and cast their vote for the candidate of their choosing. In this election now in 2024, many states didn't even have primaries. We actually had a few people who stepped up to run against Joe Biden in the primary election, and their names were not allowed to be on some ballots in these states. So to say that, first of all, there was even a democratic process to select Joe Biden to be the nominee is a pure lie. And that lie is continuing on now as they try to create this new narrative and this facade of how the Democratic Party is going to the grassroots from the bottom on up to select Kamala Harris as the nominee. None of that has happened. What are we at? It's Wednesday now. This announcement was just made that President Biden was not going to run on Sunday. Where was the bottom-up grassroots voices being heard and votes being cast now for Kamala Harris to be the new Democratic nominee? It's a lie. It hasn't happened. They have decided that she will be the nominee, but they're trying to pretend as though that this is a decision being made by the American people, or certainly Democratic primary voters, to try to bolster her position rather than seeing it for what it actually is, which is a coronation by the Democrat elite who've been calling the shots for Joe Biden, who's been a figurehead for the Democrat elite for the last 3.5 years. And now they see in Kamala Harris someone who will continue to be a figurehead and who will do whatever they tell her to do.
That's exactly right. She's going to owe them. She's going to owe them big. It's right on brand, though, Tulsi, for the Democrat Party and what we've seen recently, where we've just been through years of them telling us not to believe our lying eyes when it came to Joe Biden's decline. And then when it was no longer, they were no longer capable of hiding it, and Kamala subs in, don't believe your lying eyes that this looked like a top-down effort. She was made the nominee by fiat. You guys really actually voted for it. This came from you, the grassroots. And I have to say, of all the ones to object, finally you see BLM coming out and saying, this is not okay. She's been placed in there. We object to this. We do not support her. And shouldn't there be at least the semblance of democracy here? I mean, this might be the first time I've agreed with the messaging coming out of that group.
It is very telling again, and it's a continuation of two things. Number one is across the entire Biden-Harris administration, they have consistently shown that they believe if they say something, that it is somehow true. And number two, that we, the American people, are stupid enough to buy what they're saying and not pay attention to what they're doing. We've seen this dramatically with their open border policies. Over and over again for the last 3 years, President Biden, Kamala Harris, Secretary Mayorkas, over and over again telling the American people, the border is secure. The border is secure. There is no crisis at the border. Don't worry about this. There's nothing to see here, folks. And then all of a sudden, because they see voters are looking at what's actually happening, they're not buying their lie. President Biden does this last-minute political election year executive order to try to crack down on the border and actually acknowledge, well, actually, no, it wasn't secure, but it's the Republicans' fault and it's Trump's fault. It doesn't make sense in any way, shape, or form. They did the same thing with our economy. Bidenomics is working great. It's one of our greatest success stories. The economy is going to be great. The recession is not going to last very long. It's just a temporary thing. Don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. Meanwhile, everyday Americans are noticing that they can afford less and less every time you go to the grocery store, recognizing that our economy is not doing very well. Everything costs more now. And when are these prices going to fall? When is inflation going to go down in enough of a way that makes it so that people can not have to be so concerned about how to cover the basic expenses of everyday life? We're seeing the same thing happen here. I think this statement from Black Lives Matter is very telling because they're speaking the truth, first of all, but second of all, also that it shows that they expect Black voters to fall in behind Kamala Harris lockstep, once again playing the identity politics game, rather than actually looking at what are the issues that are of concern to African-American voters, to different demographics and constituencies across our country. They're not actually focused on solutions to the real challenges we face, once again focused on what they say and hoping we fall for the lie, and the optics of what they're presenting that are not reflective of the truth of the world and country that we live in today.
So on the subject of the economy, I believe that this is one of the reasons Democrats are struggling so mightily. And I think it's, so far we've seen Harris as well. It's only been days, so take it with a grain of salt, with young people, because they're being directly affected. They can't get into the economy. They can't get anything close to a running start. They're dragging. They can't find jobs. I also happen to believe the over-the-top DEI messaging that these young people have grown up with and been immersed in high school and college has turned a lot of them on these Democrats. They don't want their skin color and their gender and their whatever shoved down their throats. But look at this report from CNN. I've got 2 sound bites here from this guy, Harry Enton, who watches the polls carefully for them. They're very interesting, Tulsi. We'll play the first one and then we'll go to the second. Watch.
Joe Biden won voters under the age of 35 by 21 points. What do we see with Kamala Harris? Well, she's still ahead, but the margin here is significantly less than what we saw with Joe Biden back in 2020. She's up by just 9 points. You may make the argument that was better than Biden was doing before he got out, but compared to that Democratic baseline, where Democrats have historically in presidential elections, at least this century, been carrying that young vote by 20 or more percentage points, she is way down from that. Democrats say they're more motivated to turn out after Biden left the race. Well, we do see a significant portion of Democrats who say yes, 39%. The thing I was interested in was it disproportionately younger voters who said that they were more likely to turn out or more motivated to turn out. And what we see here is it's 42%. Not a big difference between 42 and 39%. So this idea, again, that the vice president has unique potential to dig in and get young voters to turn out, John, it's just not there in the numbers despite all the internet memes that are going around.
They've only gotten a 3-point bump with young voters on enthusiasm since they announced her. Let me play the second one because this speaks more to party identification. And you and I both know you used to be a Democrat. I did too. Yeah. When you're young, that's when the Democrat Party is kind of usually most appealing. Not necessarily right now. Look at this.
I want to look at party identification again. Voters under the age of 35. Go back to 2020. This is the Pew Research study. This is one of the best studies that we have. And look at that. 56% of young voters said that, in fact, they were Democrats. They identified as Democrat or lean Democratic. You look down at 2024, it's 49%. Look at the Republican jump from 39 to 49%. So when we say that Harris is doing worse than Biden, it's not that she's uniquely bad. It's rather she's fighting uphill. She's trying to fight against a wave that is going against the Democrats among young voters. And Harris may be unique in some ways. Maybe she does slightly better than the generic Democrat, but not all that much.
So for the listening audience, it shows that the Republicans used to be at a significant disadvantage in getting young people to vote and register Republican, and it's been completely erased. And Democrats have gone from having 49% of the young voters registered as Democrat to just 30. They've lost 10 percentage points off their share. So you explain that one to me, Tulsi, because that's a problem for them.
You know, what I think is encouraging of what we're seeing here is that you have young people who are questioning. They're not just accepting whatever they're being fed. Again, we can't cast a broad brush and say all young people this or that, but it's encouraging to see that there are more young people who are not just accepting at face value what the Democratic leader is saying when they say, hey, a boy can become a girl simply by declaring that is so, and that boys should be allowed to compete in girls' sports. I think people are actually, this is young people, but I think across the board are recognizing the literal and pure insanity of these woke radical ideologies of the Democratic elite are not only advocating for, but pushing and mandating in our schools. The fact that in some schools now, for example, a track team in my home state of Hawaii, a girls' track team now has half of the entire team are biological males competing on a girls' team, taking away those opportunities from our young women and girls. I think every rational, open-minded person would look at this kind of example and just say, this is insanity. It's crazy. And so you mentioned some examples with regard to the economy. You look at examples related to our open borders and how it's not just the border states now that are feeling the effects and impacts of the almost 4 years of open border policies under the Biden-Harris administration. It's small towns, it's rural communities. I was in Montana recently and was talking to some folks there. This is Montana. You couldn't get farther away from the border on any coast or the Southwest than Montana. And even there, they are being impacted by the illegal immigration crisis and an increasing presence of criminal activity by the cartels who have taken a stronghold there. It is harder for everyday Americans, young people who are usually not attached to an affiliation of one party or another from a generational standpoint. So it's encouraging to see how people are using their common sense, being critical thinkers, being independent-minded thinkers about, okay, well, which party and which candidate is more accurately representing common sense and what is actually in the best interest of themselves, their families, their communities, and our country.
Some Americans enjoy using their credit cards because it can be a hassle-free and secure way to pay. But our sponsor, the American Payments Coalition, says that some DC politicians want to change all that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. They say this bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, which allows them to use untested payment networks that could jeopardize your data security and rewards. They say corporate megastores will make more money and you will wind up paying the price. Find out more at guardyourcard.com and consider telling Congress to guard your card while you're there, too. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.